Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Once upon a time there was a little girl whose hair was so bright yellow that it sparkled like spun gold in the sun. For this reason, she was called Goldilocks. One day, Goldilocks went into the meadows to collect flowers. She wandered around, and after a while, she came to a forest where she had never been before. She went further into the forest, and it was very cool and shady. Soon she came to a little house which was completely secluded in the forest, and because she was tired and thirsty, she knocked on the door. She hoped that there were good people living there who would give her something to drink and that she could rest for a while. Goldilocks didn't know it, but this house belonged to 3 bears. There was a big daddy bear, a middle-sized mommy bear, and a sweet little baby bear, not bigger than Goldilocks herself. The 3 bears had just gone out for a walk in the forest while their dinner was cooling. So when Goldilocks knocked on the door, no one answered. She waited for a while and knocked again. When no one answered, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. There were 3 chairs in a row. The first chair was a big chair. This was Daddy Bear's chair. The next chair was a middle-sized chair. This was Mommy Bear's chair. The last one was a small chair, and this was Baby Bear's chair. And on the table there were 3 bowls of steaming porridge. And so, thought Goldilocks, the people will come back soon to eat their porridge. She wanted to sit down and rest until they came, so she first sat in the big chair, but the cushion was much too soft and much too big. She seemed to disappear into it. Then she sat in the middle-sized chair, but the cushion was too hard. After that, she sat in the small chair, and that was just right. She fit in it as if it were made for her. Goldilocks sat in the chair and swayed gently back and forth. There was still no one at home, and she looked at the bowls of porridge on the table. They probably aren't very hungry people, thought Goldilocks to herself, or they would have come home already to eat their dinner. The first bowl was a big bowl with a big wooden spoon in it. This bowl belonged to Daddy Bear. The second bowl was a medium-sized bowl with a medium-sized wooden spoon in it. This bowl belonged to Mommy Bear. And the third bowl was a small bowl with a small silver spoon in it. This bowl belonged to Baby Bear. The porridge in the bowls smelled so delicious that Goldilocks decided she would taste it. She took the big spoon and tasted the porridge from the big bowl, but the porridge was much too hot. Then she took the medium-sized spoon and tasted the porridge from the medium-sized bowl, but the porridge was too cold. After that, she took the small silver spoon and tasted the porridge from the small bowl. This porridge was just right and tasted so delicious that she ate it all up. After eating, she felt sleepy, so she went upstairs. There were 3 beds in a row. The first bed was a big bed that belonged to Daddy Bear. The second bed was a medium-sized bed that belonged to Mommy Bear, and the third bed was a cute little bed that belonged to Baby Bear. Goldilocks first lay down on the big bed, but the pillow was too high and she couldn't get comfortable. Then she lay down on the medium-sized bed, but the pillow was too low, and that wasn't comfortable either. After that, she lay down on the small bed that belonged to Baby Bear, and it was just right. The bed felt so good that she stayed there until she fell into a deep sleep. While Goldilocks was still sleeping in the small bed, the 3 bears came back home. As soon as they stepped through the door and looked around, They knew that someone had been in their house.
"Someone has sat in my chair,"
growled Father Bear loudly.
"and left the cushion all crumpled up."
"And someone has also sat in my chair and left it at an angle," said Mother Bear in her middle voice. "And someone has sat in my chair for a long time," squeaked Baby Bear in his high-pitched voice. Then the three bears went to the table to get their porridge.
"What's happened here?"
growled Father Bear with his deep bear voice.
"Someone has tasted my porridge and left the spoon on the table."
"And someone has also taken some of my porridge and thrown it over the side," said Mother Bear in her middle tone. "And someone tasted my porridge," cried Baby Bear in his high-pitched voice, "and they tasted so much that now it's all gone." And as he said that, Baby Bear looked very sad. "If someone has been here, they might still be in the house," said Mother Bear. So the three bears went upstairs to look. First, Father Bear looked at his bed.
"Someone has been lying in my bed and pulled the covers down,"
he growled with his heavy voice. Then Mother Bear looked at her bed.
"Someone has also been lying in my bed and taken the pillow off,"
said Mother Bear in her middle voice. Then Baby Bear looked at his bed, and there was Goldilocks, with her cheeks as pink as roses and her golden hair spread all over the pillow. "Someone has been lying in my bed," Baby Bear squeaked excitedly, "and she's still there." When Goldilocks heard the heavy voice of Father Bear in her dreams, she dreamed it was thunder rolling through the sky. And when she heard the middle voice of Mother Bear, she dreamed it was the wind blowing through the trees. But then she heard the high-pitched voice of Baby Bear, and it was so shrill and high that it woke her up immediately. She sat up in bed, and there were the three bears looking at her. "Oh, dear me!" cried Goldilocks. She tumbled out of bed and ran to the window. It was open, and she jumped out before the bears could stop her. Then she ran as fast as she could back home, and she never went near the forest again. But Baby Bear cried big tears because he wanted to play with the pretty little girl. The Three Little Pigs. Once upon a time, an old mother pig had 3 piglets. Unfortunately, she didn't have enough food to keep them, so she sent them out to seek their own luck. When the first pig went out, he met a man with a bundle of straw. The pig said, "Sir, please give me the straw so I can build a house." The man gave him the straw, and the pig built a house out of straw. Soon after, a big bad wolf passed by. He knocked on the door and said,
"Hey, little pig, let me in."
The pig replied, "No, no, not by the hair on my chinny chin chin."
"Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in,"
said the wolf. And so he did. He huffed and he puffed and he blew the door down. The little pig ran quickly away to his brother. His brother, the second pig, had met a man with a bundle of sticks. The pig said, "Sir, please give me the sticks so I can build a house." The man gave him the sticks, and the pig built a house of sticks. He was sitting in his house, feeling proud, when he heard a knock on the door. It was his little brother. "The wolf blew my house down. Please, can I stay here?" "Of course, my house is made of sticks. It's safe for sure," his brother said. Then the big bad wolf came by the house made of sticks and said,
"Hey, little pig, let me in."
"No, not by the hair on my chinny chin chin," replied the pig.
Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in,"
said the wolf. And so he did. He huffed and he puffed, and he blew the door down. The two little pigs quickly ran away to their other brother. The third pig had met a man with a load of bricks. The pig said, "Please, sir, give me those bricks so I can build a house." The man gave him the bricks, and the pig built a house out of bricks. He was sitting in his house when he heard a knock on the door. It was his brothers. "The wolf has blown our houses down. Please, can we stay here?" "Of course. My house is made of brick. It's safe for sure," the brother said. "But the wolf will surely come around here. Let's make a plan to make sure he never bothers us again." So the three little pigs came up with a plan. And just like the pig predicted, the wolf came to his house. The big bad wolf came to the house made of bricks and said,
"Hey, little pig, let me in."
No, not by the hair on my chinny chin chin," replied the pig.
"Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in,"
said the wolf. So the wolf huffed and puffed, and he huffed and puffed, and he huffed and puffed, but he couldn't blow the door down. Soon he realized he couldn't open the door by huffing and puffing. Then, of course, the wolf became angry and decided that he would come after the pigs through the chimney. But the three little pigs knew that he was planning to do that, and they hung up a water kettle over the fire. And just as the wolf came down the chimney, he took the lid off the kettle. The hot steam reached the big bad wolf, and with a howl, the wolf shot up.
"Ouch, ouch, 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 ouch! Oh, you pigs! I will get you someday!"
The wolf ran away as fast as he could. And after that, the big bad wolf never came back again. He was too scared of the three smart little pigs. And the pigs, they lived happily ever after, together in the house made of bricks.
Hansel and Gretel. On the edge of a forest lived a lumberjack and his wife. They had 2 children, Hansel and Gretel. The family was very poor, and often there was not enough to eat. One evening, the wife said to her husband, "Tomorrow morning we will take the children and leave them deep in the forest. They won't be able to find their way home, and we won't have to feed them." The husband wailed and did not want to cooperate with the plan, but his wife finally persuaded him. Hansel and Gretel had heard this. "What shall we do now, Hansel?" the girl asked. "Wait, little sister, I have a plan," said Hans with confidence. And when his parents were asleep, he sneaked out of the cottage and stuffed his pockets full of white pebbles. The next morning, their parents did indeed take Hansel and Gretel into the forest. They walked for a long time, but Hans secretly dropped a white pebble every few meters. Deep in the forest, the lumberjack built a fire for his children and said he would come back to collect them later. But the day passed and no one came back. The children finally fell asleep, and when they woke up, it was the middle of the night. Gretel was scared, but Hans told her about the white pebbles. He took his sister by the hand, and so they returned to their home early in the morning. Their father was overjoyed, but not much later, the food was almost gone, and his wife again wanted to leave their children in the forest. And again, the man finally agreed. Hans wanted to go and collect pebbles again, but the woman had locked the door. So this time he had to go without pebbles. However, Hans always threw small crumbs of his last piece of bread on the ground. Again, the children were left by the fire, and again they woke up alone in the middle of the night. But when Hans looked for the trail of breadcrumbs, he couldn't find them. The little birds had eaten all the crumbs. So the children wandered around the forest for hours. They were hungry and thirsty and were about to give up, when they suddenly saw a very special little house. The house was made of bread, the windows of sugar, and the roof of pancakes. The children immediately started eating them. Suddenly, a voice sounded from the house. "Nibble, nibble, nibble. Who is nibbling my house?" And the children answered, "The wind, the wind." And they continued eating undisturbed. Then suddenly, the door opened, and a very old woman stood in the doorway. "Come in, children. I won't hurt you." Inside, Hansel and Gretel were given more delicious food and were allowed to sleep in soft beds. But the old woman was actually a wicked witch, and children were her favorite food. The next morning, she locked Hans in a cage. Gretel had to constantly make good food for him so he would get fat. But Hansel was clever, and every time the witch asked if she could feel his finger, he put out a stick. The witch could no longer see very well and thought it was his finger. 4 weeks passed. One day, the witch had had enough and decided to eat Hans, fat or not. She turned on the oven and, after a while, asked Gretel to feel if the oven was hot enough. But Gretel understood what the witch wanted to do and pretended not to understand. "Stupid child," cried the witch. "Look, you have to put your head in the oven like this." At that moment, Gretel pushed the witch and closed the oven door. Gretel immediately freed Hansel. The children were overjoyed. Now that the witch was dead, they took a good look around her house. It was full of precious stones and pearls. They filled their pockets and went looking for the way home. After walking for a while, they suddenly recognized the forest path. They ran as fast as they could to their father's cottage. The lumberjack was overjoyed that his children were back. He had missed them so much. His wife had died in the meantime. With all the pearls and gems from the witch's cottage, Hansel, Gretel, and their father never had to worry about food again for the rest of their lives, and they lived happily ever after.
The Tale of Peter Rabbit. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I'm going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate.
First, he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, who should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees, planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out,
Stop, thief!
Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have got away altogether if he had not, unfortunately, run into a gooseberry net and got caught up by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears. But his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wiggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed, "Ka-tissue!" Mr. McGregor was after him in no time and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go along a straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden.
Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea. She gave a dose of it to Peter, 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper.